Hello and welcome to our IG Live. We are at a special time today because we are going to be talking to Varya from Creative World of Varya, and she is in China. And I am here in California, which means we have a very big time difference. So we have gone live at a little bit earlier than usual to try and accommodate that. But I'm very excited to be talking to her. Hello. Because excuse me, one of the original members of Multicultural Kid Blogs and a board member for many years. So great to have her on here. Hello.
Hi,
So good to talk with
quick peek
you.
at my TV. Yeah, it's been a while.
Well, I just want
It's
to say,
been a
first of
while.
all, acknowledge the fact that you were so
Oh,
kind to do
what's
this
this?
very late at night for you because, as I was saying, I'm in California. It is 8 o'clock in the morning for me, and is it 11 o'clock for you at night? Is that
Yeah,
right?
11.
So,
Yes.
Varya, when we were setting this up, I told Varya, I said, I just don't think I'm awake before 8 a.m., but I don't think people are ready to see me on camera before 8 in the morning. And she was very kind to stay up late to do this there. So I really appreciate that. So I think that's one of the fun things that happens with multicultural kid blogs is because we are all over the world. And sometimes figuring out the time zone differences and that what time is it for you and what's the time, all of that
Right.
is just one of the things that happen. Although I suppose that you deal with that all the time as an expat living in China.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So thank you for doing that, for accommodating. But let's go ahead and jump in. And why don't we start off and you can just introduce yourself for those that don't know you.
Well, my name is Varya, as you know, and originally I'm from Russia. I've lived in China for the past 22 years. I left around the end of 2001 for an exciting gig to teach English. And I thought I would just stay a year, but as a year was over, I was asked to stay a little longer. Then SARS started the first pandemic, and I couldn't go back. When I finally was able to go back, I really missed China, and I decided that that's where I wanted to be. Years later, I got married to an old friend of mine, and we had 3 kids who were born all here in Zhuhai, where we live, the south of China. And yeah, that's life here now.
And so one of the things that we wanted to talk, I mean, we were setting this up, but there were so many topics that we could have talked about working in China or about your work as in early childhood education. But we decided to talk about an aspect of expat life that can be really difficult, which is figuring out schooling. And like you said, you have 3 kids, and maybe we could just start off to set the scene. What are the options available for schooling, and is it different for you as an expat versus say like locals, or what are the options that you have?
Well, depending on where you are, the options could be different. We're in a smaller city, and we have limited options. Some years back, it was possible for expats to go into public education, but it's become pretty much impossible unless one of the parents is Chinese, or these are the overseas Chinese or the Chinese who have so-called out of mainland ID cards from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan regions. And it's become kind of hard. Even if the child went here to a Chinese preschool, it's virtually impossible to join a public school here, which is kind of fine because based on the experience we had in the recent years, because there's so many different reforms going on in China, and it works great for local people because they have a certain, education system, but expats, most of them here are for just a certain amount of time. Very few expats like us who have lived here for such a long time and kind of don't really have plans of relocating anytime soon. So people choose private education. Some of our friends are in Chinese schools, but in private schools, which is easier. They're costly, but they give some variety of activities. We were in and out of homeschooling, despite the fact that my kids did go to a Chinese kindergarten, but the way we face challenges in local schools. I pulled my kids twice out of school to homeschool, and the last time I pulled them out, an international school offered me a job, and the kids came with me. So I guess because I'm a teacher by profession, that's pretty much what I've done for the past 27 years. That worked out really well. Not everyone is like, and not everyone can homeschool. So people, of course, have to figure out the way to educate their kids. I know there are quite a few homeschooling parents in China, and they do either homeschooling by themselves, or they follow some online curriculum, or sign their kids up for online schools that offer kind of homeschooling, but with teachers online. So yeah, so the options are right now are private Chinese schools or international schools. And of course, the difference in cost between the two is very high. If you're relocating here with a company that covers your education fees, that's great. If not, you have to make a considerable amount to join an international school. And if your child is young when you relocate to China, of course, it just makes sense to put them into a preschool that uses English as a language of instructions, because it would be easier later on if you continue into elementary and middle and secondary level to continue this education in Chinese.
I guess that was one of the questions I was thinking of. I'm not familiar with the situation in China, but I know in other countries where I've met expats, one of the things they are always thinking of is what the future is, whether their child is going to stay in that country or whether they think they're going to go abroad, especially for university. And so thinking about, like you said, what language is a really big issue. Do they want the child to really have instruction in the local language? Do they want it to be in English because they're planning to go to an English speaking university later on? Is that something that you took into account as a factor? How did that factor into which schooling that you chose?
Well, my husband speaks English as his first language, so there was no problem with English ever. We do have Russian in a minority situation, mostly because when my kids were little, we really had almost no one around, very few friends, peers, that similar age kids to be with. And then as we all are in different schools, we don't get to meet each other so much. So it's possible to, of course, support the language and everything. There's so many ways. But anyway, we have a little bit different idea here. Maybe it's a whole new conversation to have next time. But anyway, so English never was our problem. And for those people who are not, whose first language is not English and not Chinese, they can still find ways to acquire English, because English in China is one of the languages that is taught in schools. Maybe not in a super perfect level, but it's the language that it's one of the main subjects. And in their final examinations in primary school and middle school and high school, they do pass the language skills. Besides, there are different kinds of courses you can take. So that is not a big deal, to be honest. But yeah, you have to consider where your child is going to go. In our case, we have a very interesting family. I'm from Russia. My husband grew up in Tanzania, and he doesn't really have any family left there. Everybody moved out and moved, to different places. We don't have plans going back home because, well, first of all, I've lived out of the country for a very long time, and then our kids don't really feel very Russian. I mean, they understand, they accept, and they love the fact that their parents are from different countries, but they have their home as here in China. So we did want them to learn Chinese. And now that they go to international school, they still continue taking Chinese there as well. And I think it's important. I also feel when you're in a country where the language is especially so different from your own language, it's a really good effort, even you're here for a short time, to learn to pick up some of that language, because we know that multilingualism is absolutely amazing. It helps you not just with an ability to speak, but it develops you at any age, creates neural connections in your brain, and advances you in so many different ways. So making an effort for yourself and for your younger children who are more flexible, you know, when it comes to languages, to study the language of the country despite of where you're going, international education or local education. In my opinion, it's important. So I do know that there are expats here who do think about it the same way, and they come for 3 or 5 year contract, and do even adults, they join some courses and they pass what's it called for adults. There is an exam in Master of Chinese Language, it's called HSK, and a bunch of my friends have been like working on passing, you know, advancing like HSK1, HSK2, and they're doing really well. They feel it's also like really important, and they may never work with Chinese when they go back home, but it's a great skill to have because people are moving around and you never know what situation you're going to end up with, right? So yeah, so my advice is to, despite of what your plans are, make an effort to just learn some of it, because it also brings you closer to the culture and the people you're with. You can make friends with people who do not speak your language, and it's also very important for the community awareness.
Definitely, especially for, like you said, for your kids, if they're making friends, you know, they want to fit into the local culture. And just Chinese, like out of all the languages, it's got to be one of the top ones that you would want to learn as far as usefulness in the world. Yes, thank you. I don't know if you're able to see some of the comments. Well said.
Yeah, I can see. Thank you.
Yes, and I think you're in a crowd that is very supportive of multilingualism, although not all expats, I'm sure, feel that way. You know, I'm sure there's some that feel like you're just there for a few years, you know, you just
Right.
do what you need to do and look towards moving on. But to go beyond just the language, what other factors did you keep in mind when you were choosing the schooling? Because I imagine the method of instruction can be really different, or you know, testing, you know, how kids are allowed to be, or you know, what their role is in the classroom, the teacher versus the student. I'm sure that was all something that you thought of as well.
Well, you know, no matter the school, I feel like a lot depends on the homeroom teacher, how the homeroom teacher is. And this teacher sets the tone of the whole class, the discipline level. The first time we left from school was mostly because the homeroom teachers were really careless. I'll just be kind in this regard. It was really challenging for our daughter, and we left. I cannot say that the education level was bad. It was the human factor that made us leave. And when we went to another school, it was actually generally okay. It's not very easy because typically the smaller, not smaller, but like less expensive private schools, they are usually semi-private and they're partially sponsored by the government. So the number of kids could be bigger, just as big as in public education. In our kids class, there are like 48 kids, which when I tell people abroad, their eyes go like, oh no, that's too much. But that's typical here because the number of people overall in the country is so big, right? So but it was okay, and the homeroom teachers were very nice. And actually, I would have kept my 2 younger ones in primary school longer, but because their sister was leaving the middle school for other factors, they were like, no, we don't want to stay without her. It's like one school, you know, they have primary and middle level. And I said, okay, that's fine. You know, we've done this before. We can do it again. So what the deciding factors were, well, we always looked at how the school is organized, how transparent they are. With the second school, actually, we followed a very typical local way, which is making connections with people. So a friend introduced us to the director of school, and we've discussed like our special situation with them. They've never really had foreigners before. I mean, they had some, but kind of like mixed kids, where one parent is Chinese. And they were very accommodating in many ways, but they did not have enough experience, for example, with the middle school students, because that was a boarding school, and we really did not want our child to board in middle school. So I would say that human factor is one of the important here. You have to like get to know the school a little bit and have a good communication. Because as foreigners, we also do not know a lot of things about education, so it's a learning curve for us. So good communication with the teachers was also very important. And for us, we also could not, because we are here, on our own contract, so nobody pays for the kids' education or our rent. We cover everything ourselves. So we were looking into an affordable education. Also, we have 3 kids, educating one maybe in a fancy school is okay, but educating 3 becomes a little bit more expensive. So we were looking at that too. So combination was all right with the second school. And we were looking, of course, into making sure that the kids study the language, they get the skills, they also get like outdoor time and playtime there. So yeah, these were the pretty much the factors. But here it's not like abroad, because the Chinese education has a very straightforward system. Once you go from to grade 1, at least to grade 9, there is a very, very strict strict rules of what you can teach in the school and you can't teach in the school, and the amount of material that has to be covered. So a lot of homework, like be ready for that. If you're in China and you're in like Chinese school, a lot of homework, mostly because Chinese language is not like English language. If you have to memorize the characters, so you have to write a lot, a lot. Oh, man. So so the human factor and affordability were 2 main things for us. And as language of instructions, as I said, we are okay with our kids continuing education here or somewhere abroad. So having them learn Chinese and going on with English, and if they want to pick up some other languages along the way, is really fine for us. We can always support that.
And how was that for you, for you as parents, supporting them at home? Like you said, the education system there is very different. The requirements and what has to be taught at certain grades and the amount of homework was all different than what you both grew up with. So was that a challenge, learning what the system was and knowing how to best support them at home, or even having the fact that the learning Chinese, whereas it's a second language for both of you, was that challenging, being able to support them at home?
Well, that's where the human factor comes in, because with our oldest daughter, the first school, as I said, was quite unfortunate. She did not get enough support. But then when she was homeschooled, we had a Chinese teacher coming every day, just in case, making sure that she would follow the same program at home as in school, like follow the same Chinese book and math book, that in case if we ever chose another school, she could go back according to her level, and not just not just go back to school, but go and be with peers, the kids the same age, which was great. And we found a teacher like that, and she brought our daughter's level up to 5th grade, and she was able to go back. And then she was able to, do her own homework by then. With the second one is very interesting. She refused to have teachers teach her. She was in grade 1 when we were homeschooling. She was basically teaching herself. She could read and write by then. Like she's a very interesting child. So when she went to Chinese school, her writing skills were not as good. Her speaking was all right. And she just got up. She knew what to do. Once in a while, she would ask her sister, can you help me? We did take them to a tutor, the same lady who tutored our oldest, but not enough, I would say, just maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, whenever they felt like, just to sort out some issues, little things that they may not have understood. And with our son, he had a great homeroom teacher. Despite having 47, 48 kids in class, he came with very poor Chinese because he did not go to Chinese preschool. He went to my daycare, and she just took time. She took time out of her break to sit down and explain everything to him. He could understand Chinese, but he could not communicate enough. And the first months he spent crying. So the human factor here was that she was so kind, so caring, and she was like that with all the kids. So she explained to them, to all the kids, she said, I would need to give him some extra time. So don't feel jealous or don't feel upset, but you know what? If you help him with his Chinese, he will help you with your English. And they had like great environment in the class. It's true, like he made such great friends, but he was the youngest and he felt like a little intimidated staying alone in school. So he was like, I also want to quit, here quitting. So yeah, and we got lucky in this way. And some things like I speak Chinese, I speak enough Chinese, I can read a little bit. So some of the things I could help with at home. We would just sit down and sometimes use it like a translator or something and just, go over the details whenever it was necessary. And then my kids did help each other. Like if like the middle one, she could help the youngest, or the oldest could just take over and just say, okay, you made a mistake here, redo it. So yeah, that worked out well in this regard.
That's nice that they have each other for support and that they are able to help each other with their homework, or just you can see the kind of relationship they have, that they all wanted to move schools together, that they wanted to stay with each other when they were changing schools. Is there anything that you wish you had known or you wish you had done differently, or things that you're really glad that you did in terms of schooling?
Well, I think I would really skip the first school we went to. I wished we just went to that first school right away. Um, I mean, but it was also experience, of course, in the very first school. But it was a little bit of a painful, emotionally painful experience for my oldest. On the other hand, maybe if we did not go there, then we would never homeschool, which was also, it was challenging, but it was also kind of nice because through that we've made really, really great friends. Like we knew some friends who later relocated to the same area, and because we were both homeschooling families, our kids became such amazing friends. They still keep up with their friendships. So it's hard to say. Yeah, I would definitely do that, but if I really had a remake, perhaps I would, and if with the schooling, I would try to go to the first school, like get to know, maybe learn about more options for kids. But we are where we are, so I'm pretty glad that it worked out as it is.
Well, just to wrap up, how is it? So you mentioned your oldest is in middle school. How does it change as they get older, either middle school or high school? Do you think that will play out a little differently than primary school?
Uh, well, she's actually in high school right now. The middle one is the middle one is in, she's going to middle school next year. Um, in regard of education, well, we're not going back to Chinese school anytime soon or ever. So I so all three of my kids, when they relocated from a local school to an international education, they had different kind of epiphanies, I would say. The middle one actually blossomed. She really did not like being in the school. She did not like being in the school with too many kids in class. For her, it was too noisy and too uncomfortable. So when we moved to a new school, there were less kids, and she was understood better who she is. The older one got a lot more opportunities we're in a school where they follow AP curriculum, so they get to choose certain paths towards college education. A lot more counseling, for kids. So that's the difference. In Chinese schools, it's very straightforward. You get your exams. So all you do in middle school and high school, you study for these final exams, and these final exams decide which school you go to. So the middle school exam decides which good high school you can go to, and the high school exam decides which good university you can apply for and get accepted to. So it's like all about, getting the best results. Whereas in international education, it's about not just the best results, but also about, having all these different paths. What if you have this result? What path could you take? Or if your result is not enough, how can you improve? And again, where can you go? So that's, I guess, the main difference between local education and international. But the reforms are going on here, and who knows in 5-10 years how this education is going to change. So right now, whatever they're doing, it works for them, for the way, the whole society is established, and there's no wrong about it. It is just what works for this, nation. So yeah, It's a little bit not fair to judge right now how it would work for my kids in middle or high school, but it would be more challenging because another, oh, I forgot to mention one more thing. So right now, full foreigners cannot take these exams. They can't really, they can do them, but it's not going to do anything for us. Like even if we take, they're called Zhongkao, it's like middle school exam, and Gaokao, high school exam. Even if we kind of still take them, but it won't be official. It's not going to be, we'll just have a record that we went to the school and maybe kind of equivalent of what grades are. But it's not like SAT scores, you know, you pass them and then they can even compare them out with other international systems. For us, it's not really possible right now to take those exams. So that's another, like a little pickle here. We would continue studying, but then we would have to take additional examinations in order to kind of, you know, enter the universities.
Well, that was what I was going to ask when you said that you can't take the exam, or if they do take them, they're not official results. Are they able to go? I know you said that for primary school and so on, they weren't able to be in Chinese public schools. Does that mean they can't go to the Chinese universities, or they would just need to take different exams in order to get in?
They would have, yeah, they would have to take a different exam, and it's I forget what it's called, but there are a couple of them. It's Gaokao equivalent, so they would have to like study additional time for it. So I mean, it would still work out, you know, even if, because we do have friends whose kids went through Chinese education. It would still work out, and the schools would still accept the transcripts because the transcripts are there. They still like give them ABs and stuff like that, or 100% or 90% grades depending on school. And when we transferred from Chinese school to international, also the fact that we had a record in the school, they could check anytime with that school through the education bureau because everything goes there ultimately. Oh yeah, so but yeah, they would have to, first of all, pass the, if they wanted to go to Chinese school, a Chinese university, they would have to pass equivalent of IELTS, right? So the proficiency of the Chinese language, if they're going to study in Chinese. Mm-hmm. If they were going to study in English, nobody really would check that. I mean, as long as they do, and maybe they would just do like a simple exam for them. And yeah, so they would have to do this equivalent exam. They would have to like have an additional study.
It's so interesting. It's fascinating because I think most of the, as you know, when we first got to know each other was when our kids were really young, and now things are evolving
Yeah.
as they're getting older. Different issues and things that we have to think about as far as high school and
Mm-hmm.
college and so on. But thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I know a lot of what we've talked about is specific to China, which I know there are people that are going to be watching that are interested in moving to China. But I think also a lot of the factors and things that you've mentioned are things that would apply in other places as well, as far as the things that you should think about and ways that you might approach looking at your child's schooling. So thank you for talking with us about your experiences.
Thank you.
And
My
yeah,
pleasure also being here and seeing you. It's been, wow.
it's so nice to actually talk to you. And for anybody that's joining us late, this is going to be up in a few minutes on Instagram, and we will also have it on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch all of it. Thank you. So nice to talk to you, Varya.
Likewise.
All right.
Have a nice day.